This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, where it's my very great pleasure to have from Switzerland Dr. Katherine Horton, who's a particle physicist who has studied at Oxford and has been involved in rather unusual situation involving stalking, abuses of the UK judicial process, and a whole lot of other rather stunning stuff. Katherine, welcome to The Real Deal.
Thank you, Jim. This is a real honor. I followed your videos on false flags, and you helped me open my eyes. So I'm very honored to be here today.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear that. And I know, of course, you've been in contact with Ole Damagard, who I regard as the best of the best when it comes to cracking these events, especially throughout Europe. He has proven so masterful, he can even predict where the next event will take place. Katherine, tell us a bit about your background, your study at Oxford, and how all of these events evolved.
Yes, so my story started very innocently. I was never involved in any of these things, and I never ever dreamed about being involved with such things. I didn't even know they existed for a very long time. So I was just a normal person. What was great is that I managed to do well at school. I won a place at Oxford, and I went there as an undergraduate. And my undergraduate was mostly fine. Only in retrospect did I realize that strange stuff started happening. But at the time, I couldn't really put it into context. I did my Ph.D. also at Oxford, and then I stayed on and I won a fellowship at St. John's College, Oxford. So throughout my research career, I was actually a particle physicist. So I was employed by Oxford, but I did research at the German electron synchrotron in Hamburg. And that's why I also wrote my PhD. And then I worked as a particle physicist at CERN, but being employed by Oxford. So this is my particle physics career. And at some point, my husband and I at the time, we decided, well, particle physics was our love, and that's what we really wanted to get into. But we wanted to do something that's more applied and directly benefiting people. And we saw that particle physics is blue sky and very, very far down the lane. So we wanted to change. So I went back, I left CERN, I went back to Oxford, and I had this wonderful fellowship that allowed me to do whatever I wanted. This is one of these ancient, wonderful things in academia where they give you money and a place to stay and say, just go and do something for the world. So I had the freedom to change fields, and I changed first from particle physics to medical physics. And there horrific stuff happened, and my two projects that I wanted to start were totally shot to pieces, and I was blocked.
Yeah, all this sounds purely academic, scholarly. You're moving into a field where you actually can do the sort of thing that for which this fellowship was designed, to wit, make a contribution to the world, to improve the state of health of the world. What could be controversial about that?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it gets interesting. It's actually this moment. And I kind of started with this backstory so that people maybe can put themselves into my shoes and understand how far I fell out of out of the skies when I realized what was really going on at Oxford. So what happened is that I thought I'm doing really well. I came up with these research projects, and I was blocked at the University of Oxford at the Institute for Biomedical Research. So I thought, okay, never mind. I've got total freedom. I'll take my project to the Institute of Cancer Research in Sutton, London.
Katherine,
and again, blocked.
At that point in time, do you have any reason, any understanding at all why you were being blocked? I mean, what was going? Did you have any sense it was a political dimension to this?
No, I really felt it was something initiated by my boss at the time, who really didn't like, women coming along and doing their own thing. I thought it was a machismo sort of issue, and I submitted a formal complaint to Oxford. Now, this is the moment when things started really unraveling. And in Oxford, you have all these positions. There's something called a senior tutor, for the fellows. And I went to the senior tutor and I explained it. He's a very honest guy, really nice guy from engineering. And at some point he said, look, don't submit a formal complaint. And I said, why? And he said, because they will crucify you. And this is when, Oxford, it's all fluffy and happy and nice, and we're all about research. That was one of the moments where I thought something doesn't add up. And he was giving me a genuine warning. And then he explained how in engineering, they had taken one of his projects and then had proceeded to destroy him, or try to, as a graduate student and as a young postdoc. So I thought, hang on, this sounds more like the mafia than it sounds like the academic world I know. And it
This
turned
was
out,
the senior tutor was telling you he had had a parallel experience?
yeah, exactly, years and years before. So, but
Did he explain over what aspect of his research he was being crucified?
yeah, it was something to do with patents, and it's the classical thing of the research department stealing somebody's patent and not admitting they were involved and they did the research. So it's typical IP theft and then strong muscling of a young researcher. But this is just kind of like a side story, and these, it was these warnings from senior guys when suddenly it's like you see the gaps in the matrix and you think, hang on, the world you're talking about is not the world I was brought up in here. But
Catherine, now just to get very clear about his experience, your senior tutor, you're saying they lambasted him by claiming he'd committed plagiarism?
no, the other way around.
What was the type of research he was doing that got him into hot water?
I actually don't know very well, but it was the other way around. He had done the research, and I think the research department claimed the patent, even though it was the title. And then he said, "Oh, hang on, it's mine." And then he submitted a complaint, and they just
the department was appropriating his own research for their benefit, and were upset when he protested that wasn't right.
Exactly. And this was, he was talking about not even Oxford, but another university in Australia. But he said, look, this is what happened to me, and I warn you, you have no idea what you're going up against. As I thought, hang on, no, I just want to submit a complaint. I'm entitled. This is how I thought, because I never understood what Oxford actually was. I do now. But imagine, so this is what happened. And this is why I left medical physics again. And then I had, still over a year left of my research fellowship. And I thought, okay, I've seen so much of what I would consider corruption and just corrupted systems. I said, I want to understand precisely as a physicist why all of our systems are just so bad and so corrupted. How can it be that so many intelligent people with PhDs working together produce something like this,
After all, the United Kingdom has a great career regarding the common law, the Magna Carta, for crying out loud, for human rights, for due process in a judicial system. This is all completely outrageous. It sounds as though when Oxford is touted as one of the great universities of the world, and of course we know it's actually an assemblage of a whole lot of little independent colleges, this is really quite a shocking development, I must say.
Yeah, and it gets better than that, because through this experience, this is looking back, crumbs in comparison to the rocks that were about to hit me in the face, But this is how I came to change fields. So if anybody is wondering why is she a particle physicist but talking about medical physics and now she's doing this is why. This was my entire development. So I dipped my foot into medical physics, was never allowed to even start my own research projects, and then started researching the physics of complex systems precisely because of all the nonsense I saw. So what I did is I thought, right, I'm going to be uber academic, and I'm going to be very systematic, and I will study complex human systems one after the other. And I want to really understand what's going wrong and why. And the biggest human system in Britain is the judicial system. They have along the finance industry, of course, but they call it the judicial industry in Britain, okay? And they want to sell it worldwide. They're quite proud of it. So I didn't have any, avenue into the financial industry because it's ivory towers, even more so than Oxford, but the judicial system is open. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to some high profile case and I will try to understand how the judicial system works and try to deduce why it's so expensive and so inefficient. So at the time in the press, there was a really big court case called Berezovsky versus Abramovich happening. It was in the papers daily. Every single person in the senior common room read the papers and was talking about it. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I discovered that the court hearing is public. It's just down in London. I thought, yeah, why don't I just go pop along there, and have a look and make that my first case study. Now, looking back, I think there was much more involved stuff that actually triggered me into having this sort of way of thinking, but I was oblivious at the time. So I went along and I went to this court case. There was tons of journalists there all the time. There were members of the public. And then what happened?
Just for focus, what was the issue in the court case? What did it revolve around?
Basically what it revolved around was what's called the rape of Russia. Okay, the rape of Russia was when oligarchs moved in and they bought a state, so mining.
So after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, 1990-91, how the oligarchs came up to buy up state assets on the cheap to make themselves fantastically wealthy.
Yeah, exactly. For pennies on the dollar, really, so massive conglomerates were bought for, the price of a can of Coke. So that's exactly it. And they became super rich. And now what the entire court dispute was about is that Abramovich was heading one of these companies and had several of these companies. And Berezovsky claimed that he had a title to it. He had shares. And Abramovich said, no, there was never such agreement. There was never a written contract. And it's contracts among businessmen are also valid when it's just said, it's just spoken. So the entire court case went over months in great detail about the ins and outs of Russian and British law and contract law and this and that. And the upshot was Berezovsky wanted a couple of, certainly many, many millions, but maybe even a couple of billions from Abramovich. And this guy said, no, why should I? So this was the crux of it. But the curious thing is, when I tell people now, they think, oh, I was somehow, interested in the Russians. It's like, no, this was the fireworks, the oligarch lifestyle. What I was really interested in was the court. How does the court work? Because I knew nothing about these oligarchs. I still know very little, but the court was very interesting. And I was thinking, okay, how does this work as a system? And I was looking at absolutely everything, building maintenance all the way through. And this is what was my main purpose was. But MI5 started stalking me. So they stalked me home. They stalked me back to court every single day. They placed a man, always a different person, to just wait for me at the end of my drive every single morning, who would just wait there as if he was waiting for somebody. And as soon as I came out, he would stare at me and follow me 50 meters.
Katherine, as precisely as you can, what threat do you perceive you pose to them, or at least in their own minds, that they should be stalking you?
I think none whatsoever, because everything I did, I talked at length, even before I went to London, to friendly tutors at Oxford, what I was talking about. Everything about me was transparent. And by the way, these Oxford colleges are bugged, okay? So you can't have a conversation in Oxford College that's not recorded by MI5. I think it's physically impossible, okay? So there's
nothing. Is bugged.
Yeah.
Do you believe the same? Do you believe the same to be true of Cambridge?
Yeah, absolutely. The same also of Harvard and Yale, because I didn't realize, but these elite universities are, first of all, the recruitment ground, the expertise recruitment ground of the intel agencies, and they have covert military projects where they want the top researchers. So it goes without saying, and I never thought about it in these terms, but it goes without saying that the best universities in the country will always be involved with the intel agencies.
Katherine, can you imagine the enormity of the project of, recording and then listening or transcribing? I mean, you're talking about an enormous entourage of spies working behind the scene just to maintain surveillance over students at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale. I mean, that would be an industry in and of itself.
Well, it is, but also these days it's automatized. So, for example, we know from the NSA whistleblower William Binney about mass surveillance. So what I'm saying is what's being done to an entire nation through mass surveillance, and then you've got AI going through audio samples, for example, generating a transcript. I have access to one platform called trint.com, where you can upload an audio file, and within 2 minutes, it gives you a perfect transcript of everything that was said.
Wow.
That's just AI.
They're using key words, phrases, and expressions to sort things out that are of interest to them.
Yeah, but it's much more than that these days, I think. But I think what happened is that, it's what we now experience as mass surveillance and has now been published by the NSA whistleblowers was prototyped and guinea pigged by older systems that go back far, far, far. So, for example, at Hartford College, during my time at Oxford, there was a scandal because somebody found a fairly big and bulky audio recorder, a surveillance device in the senior common room. And there was uproar because they said, how come people try to, want to record us? Well, I thought, don't be surprised. You're the field expert of one area or another. Just think of industrial espionage. How much money can one make of, tapping your brains in the lunch break? So there's a different side to the reality we thought that we knew, and I had to learn it painfully. But my entire story into how I ended up where I'm now is, I was totally blue-eyed, innocent, thinking, okay, I want to do this. And then I started being stalked by MI5, and they started stalking me November 2011, and it hasn't stopped to this day. I am stalked 24/7 wherever I go, whichever country I go to. I'm picked up and dropped off, and all my phones are surveyed, everything. And I thought the whole thing started at the High Court. But then after running an investigation that I'll talk about, I realized, no. Actually, I was property of MI5 on the day I went to Oxford. And when I started investigating other victim cases similar to mine, and they started talking about generational targeting and long-term targeting, multi-decade targeting, and the actual precise forensic details, suddenly my mind got triggered. And one day I remembered, hang on, there was a time in my first week at Oxford, I just had forgotten because I was so busy. When I came, I went up, and then a group of older men started stalking me. And they started photographing me in college. They photographed me on the way to lectures. And this went on intensely for 2 weeks. And then it kind of stopped. And there was always this like low level, once or twice per term, some weird people would turn up somewhere. And something would happen that I now know is called street theater. And it's an Intel device where they set memory anchors along the way. And then they can start working with that. So in other words, I have been a human experimentation subject by Intel from the year 2000, the moment I started at Oxford, for sure. So I think...
Do you have any idea why they would have selected you to be an Intel target and such intense surveillance?
I think, well, I can only guesstimate. So number one, it's not about surveillance. They know everything about me already. It's about making money of human trafficking. So I believe I have been certainly trafficked for human research. I will talk later about how the fact that I'm totally head to toe chipped. So that's number one, human experimentation. That's Oxford doing. The other thing is also sex trafficking, because I've been sex trafficked to people, not with rape, but with remote controlled rape through my chips that I have, and many, many other things. And I think
are you talking about virtual or hypothetical or honest physical experiences where you were
experiences that I measured? So I will talk about the precise evidence I have for everything I'm saying in a moment, but it is a fact that I have radio frequency chips on my head, elsewhere on my body, including my genitals. And they can be logged in, so people can access them, and they can literally rape me.
Have you done X-rays and so forth?
So these things look like calcifications, so people can find them on ultrasound and stuff like that. I have got doctors' notes from 2 dermatologists as testifying to laser surgery scars where I don't have any surgery, and these are the implanting points and so on. I have got bug detector measurements showing the radio frequency communications from my chips. And stuff like that.
Katherine,
so,
I'm just astonished. I'm just dumbfounded.
Yeah. Well, you know what? So was I. I have to say, I only found out I was chipped through the help of my former colleague, Melanie Vritchan, and I found it out in the year 2017. So it's just about a year and a half that I know that this has been done to me. But I can tell you the following. I started an investigative team at the start of 2017. And I've been investigating for now almost 2 years. And in my time, I investigated this crime cartel, intelligence agencies, non-consensual implanting, directed energy weapons, and neurotechnology. And I scanned a lot of victims. also people from the public life. And I can tell you that a ludicrously large number of people is implanted, sometimes without their knowledge.
This is stunning. I dare say your background as a particle physicist has enabled you to be a very good detective in diagnosing these in some of the targets. That's because you have that background in physics and you understand how to detect these things. You're particularly dangerous as an investigator, someone in a position to expose what's going on by virtue of your technical expertise. I mean, what a fabulous combination.
Yeah, I think they really put the foot wrong with me. I don't think I looked far too, small and harmless at the time. So they really went wrong. But, the thing is also that I have to say the measurements, I was oblivious. They don't even come from me. I had to learn from other people what bug detectors to use, how to measure these chips, because I was just clueless. And it was actually a former colleague who, I was there to measure her chips using a bug detector that other people had used in scanning. And I found the chips. And then she looked at me and she said, hang on, I can see on your forehead. Maybe you can see also, I've got scars, horizontal scars. It's very hard to see, but you can see the syringe.
Yes.
That's a laser surgery scar. And I've got massive amounts of technology here. Now, she looked at me. She said, I can see a laser surgery scar on your forehead. And she said, if you have that on your forehead, you will have a strong emitter in your neck or the back of your head. So she took the bug detector from me, said, turn around, held it there, and I could hear this thing, started beeping.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the whole interaction, by the way, is on camera. So there is a video recording of, she finding my chips. You can hear me say, oh my God, this is just amazing.
Do you want to play that from your desktop to include here?
I have it in a safe, so it's on an external hard drive in a safe. I don't have it here, but I will make it public because I'm now moving towards court cases. But just so that people can understand how I got from totally innocent particle physicist buried away somewhere in academia, no one would have heard about me, to being literally involved in, going up against the intel agencies in court. Well, the sequence was that I just started this project. They started overt stalking. And I now realize that the overt stalking is again used to, I didn't know at the time, but I have these chips also on my scalp and potentially in my brain. So what they want to do is they want to put people into scary or extreme situations and then monitor your brain.
How you process the information and how you react emotionally, intellectually, and otherwise.
Exactly. And what I was doing without noticing is by that information, they want to figure out, what does my brain look like when it's making decisions? What does it look like when I think, oh, I don't like that. Oh, I'm really scared. Or, oh, yes, let's do that. And the whole idea is that AI would learn what that looks like in the electromagnetic field. And then this chip network could regenerate the field so that when I am given some really stupid offer that's not in my best interest, they just turn on the chips, create this field, and force my brain to be in this ecstatic state of agreement and say, oh, yeah.
You can control your behavior by simulating the arrangement of synapses and neurons that corresponded to the state you were in when you were exhibiting the behavior they wanted you to now, in these circumstances, exhibit.
Exactly. And I think this is what has been going on all along, but only recently did I actually finally figure this out. Because
do you have any idea when this chipping may have begun? Would it have been before you arrived in Oxford? I mean, you would have had to have been unconscious at the time it was taking place.
Well, what I know from a whistleblower, an MI6 whistleblower called Karl Clark, he went public in the year 2009 in the German press. And there's on my website, there's his whistleblowing article in an English translation. And actually, you know what, if your viewers might be interested, so that I can back up what I'm saying before they think, look, this woman is a total kook. Let me just share my screen. This is my website, stop007.org. And if you go to the front page, what you will find is there's a library here, a research library with just a few key documents. I mean, I have 2 terabytes, so I have to upload it. But here's the most important stuff. And there's a section on the affidavits, high-profile affidavits. And down here is the interview by Karl Clark, and here's the English translation. So this is the original German article in the magazine here. It says secret surveillance and radiation torture through the secret services. And then here's the English translation next to it in the link. And in this interview, which is quite long, so I'm not sure if I find the passage, but here he talks about how the intel agencies break into private homes at night and just anesthetize people and then do whatever they like. Okay, now he does not talk specifically about chipping, but I know from the many, many victim testimonies I dealt with that people would report that they wake up one morning totally overslept, feel a bit drowsy, open brackets, as if they were anesthetized, and then they would wake up and they would report that they had something like cat scratches on their body.
Cat scratches, yes.
Yeah, a cat scratch is a telltale sign for laser surgery implanting, because the way it's done, and I imagine it must be like Formula One, you know, taking only seconds, because you take a laser scalpel, you cut the skin, the laser is so hot it coagulates the blood so it doesn't even bleed. You put in the chip, then you put on tissue glue, which I know from the legal profession is very effective. You just hold the area, you pinch it together, hold it for I think 20 to 30 seconds, and that's it. That's it. It's done. You're out through the door. And in there would be
no muss, no fuss, no blood.
Yeah, exactly. And so we know from Carl Clark's testimony that the intel agencies break in at night. They would break into hotel rooms, into student rooms, into private homes, everything. They can pick the locks and they pump an anesthetic through under the door or through the letterbox. And I suspect also maybe through the water pipes and other fittings, you know. So they've got many ways to anesthetize you and then come in, and just do this to you. So I suspect it could be that I was implanted before Oxford, but for sure I was implanted at Oxford, because suddenly weird physical symptoms started. My medical care was somehow weird and seemed sabotaged. And I'm pretty sure I've got evidence that I was fitted with these head chips, at that time. I just never understood.
Did you have any of those morning experiences where you slept late and you felt strange and so forth?
Well, as a student, if you go to the bar on a Friday night, you always think, did I just do something really funny? I wasn't that drunk, but was something in my drink? You always have this, right? Or you just think, oh, I must have been so tired from working, flat out last week. I just slept.
You hadn't realized how tired you were.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, of course, you actually weren't that tired. It was an effect of their having messed with you in the middle of the night.
Exactly. And
this is just stunning beyond belief. Absolutely stunning.
And I can tell you that had anybody told me 5 years ago or 4 years ago about this, I would have thought, right, okay.
Yes.
And I had to get there by careful investigation and putting the puzzle pieces in place. But since then, I found there's a student at Cambridge who reported being stalked and reported many other forensic details that indicate intel. There's also a newspaper report about a student, I think also at Oxford or Cambridge, a law student who complained about people repeatedly breaking into her home, into her student room. And in that case, they placed rubber ducks. You can even find this, if you search for Cambridge students, rubber ducks. Intel, I know it's Intel, they broke in and they kept putting rubber ducks in her room when she was out for lectures. So she would come back, and with time, these rubber ducks would have injuries. So one was decapitated, the other one had a dagger in its back and stuff like that. So it turned really dark and
like a voodoo doll, suggesting to you what could happen to you if you don't play their game.
Exactly. And most people, when I first read the article, I thought, okay, it's probably some students having a prank, but no student can keep breaking into the same student room because the surveillance systems or the security systems are such you can't do it. Plus, students typically don't pick locks, but MI5 picks locks. MI5 sex traffics young people, and they are totally sick in the head. So this ducks routine is totally up their street,
Do you then believe that you have physically been subjected to involuntary sexual encounters as a consequence of their manipulation of your body and mind?
Well, so the thing is, I cannot remember physical rape at all. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen, because they can drug you. But one of the things that I started experiencing for the last year, almost daily, sometimes 3 or 4 times daily, is remote controlled rape. Now, what that is that, and men report it as much as women, but sometimes men are less likely to talk openly about it. But I can tell you as an investigator, having talked to a lot of men and women, most victims are raped invariably. So the way this is done is that there are chip implants in the genital area, and electronically they can trigger exactly the same processes that the brain would during intercourse. So men are driven all the way to ejaculation, women all the way to orgasm, without even being involved mentally. It's just purely mechanical. And this is being done to virtually every victim of the intelligence agencies.
Are you then aware of having those orgasmic experiences even though you're not actually physically engaged in intercourse?
Yeah, I am.
Physiologically experiencing the response you would have had had you had a successful sexual encounter, but it's totally involuntary. You have no control over it. You can't even predict when it's going to happen. Do they sometimes do this in an embarrassing situation like a public place? You're at a bakery or something and all of a sudden you have an orgasm?
Well, to this day, and maybe I shouldn't say that publicly, they haven't done that to me yet. They typically rape me at my desk. Then again, I spend most of my time at my desk. But I know from other women that that's exactly what they do. In fact, there's news articles where this cartel is covering up what they're doing. You can find news articles in the US and in Britain about women suddenly reporting having multiple orgasms, and we're talking 50 to 80 during the day from one time point onwards permanently, so that they barely can go to the shops without this happening all the time. Now, this is physiologically impossible. It's nothing to do with the brain, but this
you mean we're at a normal physiological reaction, the body would be of necessity recovering, but because they're capable of manipulating your neurological system, they can induce it anytime they want.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, and it's horrific when it's being done to you, because you feel somebody else is controlling your body.
Sure.
So which
is exactly the case.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody else is controlling your body.
Yeah, and what's even worse is, there's electronic rape is in certain ways less traumatic than real rape, because you don't have some thug, holding you down. But it's more traumatic because a normal victim is only raped once, but an intel victim would be raped all the time. And then at some point you discover you're walking down the street and some total thug grins at you, looks down on his phone, points his phone at you, and suddenly you start being raped. And it becomes clear that he's logging into your chips and he has some app on his phone.
Really?
Yeah. And this is
have you had that experience yourself? Some total stranger all of a sudden points toward you and you're having this experience? And
yeah, exactly.
So these are undercover operatives for MI5.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually much worse than that, because you have the real MI5 people, but actually what most people don't know, MI5 has, in the year 2003, they doubled their budget. This is unprecedented in history. So in terms of finances, after 2003, there were 2 MI5s. But in terms of manpower, they tripled. So there are 3 MI5s now in terms of manpower. And in terms of operations, whatever that might be, they are 5 times as prolific. So in terms of operations, which is what the average person in the street would experience, there are 5 MI5s running rogue in Britain. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Stunning. All of this, just mind-boggling.
Yeah, and this precise quote, I think it's from the Independent. So if I'm quick, I might even pull it up. Independent, hang on, MI5 doubling budget, triple. Maybe I can find it quick enough, but it's well, I have to, maybe later on when you're talking, I'll pull it up when I have got time to Google it.
Take your time, Catherine. Pull it up. Yeah, I think evidential confirmations from even the printed media are extremely interesting to our audience.
So budget double, and it was the female head. Okay, yeah, here it is. So here's one Guardian article. Okay, so here it is. This is like one piece of evidence, and there's, I think, an Independent article where they talk about their manpower tripling. So let's bring up the Guardian.
Yeah.
Okay, so here it is. It's called how the shock of 9/11 made MI5 stronger. Yeah, my lower spine. But anyway, so this was the former head of MI5, Eliza Manningham Buller, and the double here. But in the decade since the attacks, its budget doubled and its head count has almost tripled, while intelligence operations have increased fivefold. There it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this how well is it understood in the UK that that was a manufactured event involving collusion between the CIA, the neocons, and the Department of Defense and the Mossad?
Well, if you ask people like me, I understand it very well. If you ask the man in the street, I think more and more people understand it very well. I think Britain is really cottoning on to that, you know. And
public awareness is growing.
Yes, and one thing I have to say, Jim, one thing that really helped is debunking the false flags, because you know that there was 7/7, right? I mean,
Yes.
as if the date wouldn't be a dead giveaway. But you know that was very traumatic in the experience of the Brits, and when that's debunked, it just all suddenly just becomes clear.
I have a dear friend, Nicholas Kollerstrom, who's the author of Terror on the Tube, now in its third edition. He's a leading expert on the London 7/7 subway bombing. He cracked the case by discovering that the train from Luton that the four young Muslim lads would have had to have taken to have been at the tube stops in time had been canceled that day. And therefore, they weren't even present to be the perpetrators of the fraud. And you may well know how Maud Dibb did a 1 hour from the beginning to the end of the planning with Peter Power, and how on exactly the same times and tube stops as the planned drill was taking place, it went live, and where the explosions caused the steel to come upward into the carriages when officially it was in backpacks and should have been blown downward and outward. The whole thing was a scam. In 1 hour, you can see the whole thing from beginning to end. It's entitled 7/7 Ripple Effect.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That work, and actually I've got a question, you know, maybe I should ask it offline, but one of the things I really, maybe I used your forum to just put this idea out there for discussion. I'm in the position now where I am forced to go back into court in London to just get an injunction because the intelligence agencies keep shooting at me with directed energy weapons, keep raping me and keep torturing me. And I can show you more evidence of that later. But now I have to explain to a British judge that actually MI5 and MI6 are organized crime. They do what organized crime wants to do, and these attacks are false flags. Now, one of the things I wanted to put out there to you, to your colleagues, and all the other researchers who've got dirt on not just the intel agencies, but crime in general, I would suggest what's really powerful is if we all take our specific area of expertise and we start writing generic affidavits. Generic affidavits are ones where you don't entitle one particular case in the court, you just testify about what you have, the forensics you have uncovered. And if we say it under oath that this is true to the best of our knowledge, and this would be our testimony in a court of law, as soon as we sign it, especially when it's kind of a witness signature, it becomes like kryptonite in court. This means that from the writing of that affidavit forever after, researchers in court cases anywhere in the world can refer back and say, look, there's an expert testimony about these facts, and this proves that the intel agencies were involved in crime, in high treason, and the entire rest.
And in fact, Nick Kollerstrom has a whole book entitled Chronicles of False Flag Terror, where he goes through 13 of these attacks in Europe alone. 13 in Europe alone. At moonrockbooks.com. I mean, it's one of many publications I'm so glad we have in our, what you might call our conspiracy catalog, because it provides expert documentation of the occurrence, how they were done, who was responsible, and why.
Exactly. And you know, on my website, if I may just briefly go back so that people maybe understand what I'm aiming at, because this is, I want people to understand my strategy so that they know what I'm standing for, what I'm getting involved in, and why I'm doing it. So on my website, under the research library, there's a section, let me jump to that, it's called High Profile Affidavits. And I have collected, here's, for example, an affidavit by William Binney, former technical director of NSA, Ted Gunderson, who's now deceased, and FBI agent Gerald Sosby, Carl Clark here, Andrea Davison, former MI6. And each one of these affidavits is testifying about a different puzzle piece.
This is sensational, sensational.
Well, I mean, this is not the only place where these affidavits are listed, but now comes the absolute key. This is how I want to use these affidavits. In a sense, if I go into court, I I sued British intelligence, or tried to, in the year 2016. And this is, so in a nutshell, my story was they started stalking me. They stalked me for years. I left Oxford and I wanted to start a startup. They totally demolished it. They infiltrated and subverted everything I was trying to do, and I never understood why. And I always thought this is just something between me and MI5. And then I realized, no, I'm part of a big global program, and there's an entire class of the population called targeted individuals. We're very much the equivalent of the modern equivalent of the Jews and the socialists and the homosexuals and the disabled people in the Nazi times. As soon as we are put on this list by Intel, we lose all our rights. Our stuff can be taken, our homes can be broken into, our bodies are used as biomass to maximize profit in human resources.
What crosses the line? At what point is the line crossed where they become the subjects of this wholesale abuse?
I used to think it's just whistleblowers, but then when I looked out, I have a lot of single moms, especially single moms with autistic children, and the line is crossed when an Intel agent or member of the global cartel picks you because you're great business. That's it. It's not
because of your what business?
Your great business. You can be, they can turn you into a profit one way or another. So attractive women would be sex trafficked. And the way it seems to work is that you are implanted by a team that comes into your home and implants you head to toe. Then you're hooked up. And then seems to be the case, people can pay a subscription, and then they've got the right to torture you and to rape you. And there's a lot of people who think that's fun.
Do you think some of those on the street could be subscribers to this service and paying money to the intel agencies for the opportunity to abuse someone like yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And also, so I told you that I thought the whole thing started in when I went to this court case, and then I realized, no, hang on. MI5 had already photographed me in my first week at Oxford, and there was a lot of photos taken of me. Now, the question is, what are those photos used for? I suspect I was put into a catalog. And then later on, and this is also public, what happened is that at this court case, I was there for the court. One of the lead barristers, called Jonathan Sumption, he later on, literally weeks in the middle of the court case, or towards the end rather, he stopped being a barrister and he was promoted from being a barrister to the Supreme Court. He leapfrogged the entire High Court judges and the Court of Appeal judges and became, bam, a Supreme Court judge out of nowhere. Now, this is pretty unprecedented. There were a couple of examples before him, but that's, extraordinary. Now, what happened is as soon as he became a Supreme Court judge, he already had some sort of weird interest in me during the court case. After that, he started stalking me in Oxford. Now, he has got his chambers.
He physically was stalking you. He as a person was stalking you.
Yes, he as a person, he turned up in Oxford and I recognized him. So it was literally meters from my home.
But does he have some sort of obsession with you then as a woman?
No,
As a physicist?
No, exactly. This is it, right? I'm just a dorky physicist. He even stalked me in Munich years later, again, 50 meters from my home. No, I think it's the other way around. I think I'm his control file. I think to be able to be promoted in the cartel, you need to have some dirt on you. So you can either, be involved in the torture and rape and whatever maiming of a woman, or you can kill a child, rape and torture a child. And I guess he was given the choice of, hey, are you going to rape? I'm glad he didn't kill and rape a child. Okay, so I'm happy about that much. But then he had to pick somebody probably out of a catalog, I would guess. And then, he just picks me for random reasons, and that's it.
Could he also be elevated so that cases that fall within some sort of broad umbrella that would encompass your case, for example, will come to him as a judicial authority with a right to disposition?
Well, it could be that he would be in charge of throwing these things out, and I do have evidence. So the UK Supreme Court is great because it's being live streamed, and their judgments are on YouTube. And there's one judgment in a case where people were stalked. They were protesters at an arms sale, and they were stalked and harassed by the secret police and by the normal police all the way back to the tube station. This turned into a court case and made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And in the end, the protesters were not given right. And Lord Sumption read out the judgment. Now, when a lead stalker involved with the intel agencies is reading out the judgment, I personally think this judgment is invalid because he's partial. He himself is guilty, and I saw it with my own eyes that, he even photographed him, right? That he was taking part in stalking and harassment, exactly what this court case was about. Is stalking and harassment okay by intel and the police, or is it not? And the Supreme Court found it's okay.
Katherine, you having lived through all of this, what can you tell the public ought to do to try to bring this to a halt, hold those responsible to account? It seems to me the influence of the intel agencies, even upon the judiciary, is profound, and that it may only be by widespread publicizing of these events that the people's attitude can be educated to the point where they actually understand what's going on, just as they're now beginning to appreciate what happened on 9/11, that we're talking about a mode of control over human behavior that makes each of us basically a form of a slave of the deep state.
Exactly. So now here's my reading, and I came to this conclusion not just last week. I literally, from the year 2011, November 2011, when I started being stalked, I was stalked by now, it's like 7 years, okay? I have been shot at with directed energy weapons since January 2016, so that's 3 years. And I found out in 2017 I'm chipped. So I have been through the program. Now, I also spent a lot of time investigating this judge, his background, his motifs. I spent even more time investigating intel. And my current reading is the following, okay? I believe that we were oblivious throughout our entire lives that actually there was the super architecture above all the nation states and certainly above all intel and police organizations that was instrumental in setting up these organizations to start with. They do not serve us, they serve them. And they are one global organized crime syndicate, okay? Now, these organized criminals who have set up what we now call the judiciary and the police and intel agencies, well, they recruit normal people who are totally oblivious, and these normal people face the masses. But as the people rise through the ranks, they get closer and closer to what's really going on, more and more insight, and they need to start accumulating control files. That's how this works. And this is the key. This is how everything hangs together, including with the pedophilia. The pedophilia is this control file generation mechanism, and it's also bonding between lead psychopaths. So now we have to realize that a large fraction, not just of the Supreme Court in the UK, but also of the US and elsewhere, that these judges are not free to decide. They have strong control files on them. To give you an example from the US, many people heard about the death of Justice Scalia. Now, Alex Jones did a piece on Scalia and where he died. And there's an interview about one whistleblower talking about the person who owned the ranch. And that guy was involved in shady stuff in Nicaragua, where the big safety compound, and was coordinating stuff that went down in Nicaragua. How the hell does he end up owning the ranch where Justice Scalia just happens to die in what seems like might have been possibly, quite likely, a satanic ritual, possibly, maybe involving young boys? How the hell?
Yeah, there's one story out there of, I think he was 13 years old, who slashed Scalia's throat when Scalia was abusing him sexually. And Obama's reaction to the Scalia case was very, very strange. It was really, he was dispatched in short order. I don't believe any autopsy was conducted. And this was the removal of a Supreme Court justice with well-known views about the First Amendment, especially the Second Amendment. He was a true constitutionalist. And there's been a mighty effort in the United States to undermine both the First and the Second Amendment that continues to this day unabated. In fact, is even increasing in its rapidity, with the Democrats proposing all kinds of bizarre schemes to confiscate weapons from the American people so we cannot defend ourselves against a looming tyranny.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the thing is that when I first heard about the Scalia case, I was just blown away because I still had this idealistic view of what the Supreme Court is. Now that I studied the systems analysis of complex human systems, I know that there's the super architecture of organized crime. I know that people will not be placed in the Supreme Court unless there's some Masonic ties or they have a control file or something. So it is to be expected that at least the majority or enough to sway certain court cases will be cartel insiders with control files. Now, in other words, I think Scalia, that's my view, he probably went to that ranch because these people have to refresh their control files regularly. And there's MI6 whistleblowers talking about having sessions where they have to rape young boys, not because they want to, but because MI6 is filming them doing it, and so that MI6 trusts them for the next job. Okay, now this is it. So when I discovered this, I was like, okay, hang on. I am being stalked by a Supreme Court judge who just leapfrogged the entire English judiciary. I am, chipped to the hilt. I'm raped. This is just the tip of the iceberg of the story. I think I'm his control file. Now, and I want people to start thinking about it because we are in deadlock in global society. It's not just this Supreme Court Judge Lord Sumption who has a control file. Others will have too, in France, in Spain, everywhere. What the hell are we going to do to step out of this ancient system and start changing? Because if each one of us does exactly what the cartel expects us to do, we will end up in a gridlock, which is what we expected to do, right? So that the cartel can come in and do divide and conquer.
Katherine, I want you to go back to those affidavits. I want you to pull it back up here in a screen share and talk about how these affidavits could be submitted, how they could be got into your hands so you could include them in the files and so forth. This seems to me extraordinary. I know that dozens of people who would be in the position to author these affidavits.
Yeah, so now this is it, okay? So the affidavit is key, but let me just kind of build the groundwork, because I think what we have to do, and it's up to every victim themselves how they want to play it. But when you go onto court, you've got two choices. I could go onto court and try, suing Lord Sumption, which I personally think is a waste of time because he's a lawyer. He didn't implant me. Or there's the alternative to realize, okay, he was the guy with the control file. I'm his victim, but MI6 and MI5 are the superstructure. So I am suing British Intel. I don't even care about this judge. My problem was not he turned up occasionally. My problem is I'm being chipped and assaulted. So what I want people to realize is that the very first step, and I'm very public about this, the very first step when you start rolling this up is you have to disable the control files. And only when other judges see, okay, there is a possibility to bring judgments in the favor of the victims, we can do it safely. Only then can we work with this judiciary, okay? Because otherwise we can write all the affidavits all day long if all the judges are corrupt and we don't get anywhere. So I want to start building a machinery whereby we are aware that these control files exist. We want to disable them and together move to a place where we can shut down the criminals. Now, the affidavits are totally key for the following reason. If I just go into court and start, arguing to a judge that, look, I'm implanted, I'm shot at with directed energy weapons, and MI6 are criminals, I need to prove, directed energy weapons, chip implants, and a million other things that are kind of the groundwork. I can't do it alone. But for every field, there are researchers who have dedicated sometimes decades and are literally the field expert. For example, you're the field expert in false flags. You have colleagues who are the field expert in maybe a set of false flags in their region. If they write an actual affidavit, what makes it so incredibly powerful is that they don't even need to write the affidavit for my court case. They are just testifying about the general criminality that they have uncovered. What are the forensic details so that a judge can see that this is really how it is. And then this proves that a certain intel agency or police or whoever was involved at that time would be part of high treason, deception, criminality, the whole full works. Now, all that is required for people to do that, it's actually astoundingly simple, okay? This is what makes it so powerful. So let me go back to the affidavits. The only thing you need to do to write an affidavit, so let me bring up one, I don't know, here, for example, William Binney, very high profile, former director of NSA. You just have to write a brief summary of your qualifications so that people know you're not just Joe Blogs, you really have very high standing, very high level. And then every type of affidavit has one line at the end, which is here, this one: I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States that the foregoing is true and correct. And then it's executed, date, and signed, and that's it. And the only other formal, format thing you need is it should be numbered paragraphs, because then in court one can go through and point step by step. So numbered.
I'll go back to the top, to the very beginning. Do they need a formal title here, or just
typically?
Really, I mean, this was in the context of a civil case.
Exactly. Now, this is the key.
The affidavits you're talking about don't require a legal framework. They just require that they be constructed properly.
Exactly. Now, the thing is that this particular affidavit was submitted for this particular court case. But if you strip the title, you can in principle put all this here at the top.
Show us another example or two, Catherine, of these affidavits, so it'll be obvious that they don't have to have the same.
Yeah, exactly. So let me show you the Ted Gunderson's affidavit, because when he made it, he didn't have a court case in mind.
Right.
So here, for example, here,
that's what I want. Yes, yes, yes.
And here he says, hereby, I, Ted Gunderson, hereby swear under the pains and penalties of perjury that the following statements are true and correct.
How would these be promoted to you? How would they be delivered to you?
Well, people can just send me these things by email, and then what I would ask people to do is write these general ones. So not for a specific court case, just testify about the stuff you know about. And then what you should do is, at the end, numbered paragraphs, at the end, in Britain, you sign a statement of truth, you date it, and you sign it. And here's the key. You don't need to go to a notary because they're expensive. So Ted Gunderson went to a notary here. The only thing you need to go to is a so-called person entitled to administer oaths. Now, a person entitled to administer oaths could be somebody in your local bank, or even in some states in the postal office. That's a person who looks at your ID card and says, yes, the person signing this is this person indeed, whose name and address is at the front. With my signature and my status, I certify that the signature is true.
In my local bank, I've had that done numerous times, and they don't even charge.
Yeah, exactly. So with that becomes legal kryptonite, because this is, somebody certifying your signature, which is the last thing that people can question. Oh, is this actually so-and-so, or is this fake? When that's done, and when, people start talking about the affidavits publicly, it's like, okay, that's the thing. So what I would recommend that we all do around the world, people who are experts in this and that, and there are many people who are experts in something, even sometimes without academic qualifications, but they've really studied it. If you just write it down in this format and you're willing to testify about the truthfulness of this content, I would recommend that we upload them on a website, kind of outlining what each affidavit testifies to, and then somebody running a court case can just download these, put them straight into their court bundle, and the only thing for each affidavit is the front page. That's like, which court case is it, who's testifying, that's it. And you put it on the front and into your court bundle, that's it.
Catherine, I'm just overwhelmed by your high intelligence, your breadth of knowledge and understanding, your moral courage in confronting these issues with such objectivity and impartiality. And I want to do everything I can to support you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time today to join me on a real deal interview. And I look forward to future with you, Catherine. Meanwhile, I mean, every wish for your good health and continued perseverance in this gigantic struggle on behalf of all of humanity. And that is no exaggeration. That's what we're up against.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the time and opportunity to address your audience, because it is an honor. And And I have to say, you are one of the big giants that I looked up to and learned from on my path to, you know, enlightenment, learning about these things. So it's just a great, great occasion for me today. I'm just blown away, to be honest, to finally meet you.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, with my very special guest, Dr. Elizabeth Horton, talking about a horrendous experience. Katherine Horton, the horrendous experience she's been through. I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Thank you very much. And looking forward to be of service to humanity, really. Thank you.